Playwright Anton Chekhov famously said, "Never place a loaded rifle on stage if it isn't going to go off." In other words, every detail must be relevant, and every setup should have a payoff. Thus, the narrative principle of Chekhov's gun was born. But it isn't always a gun. Chekhov's Whatever is a podcast where myself and guests watch a movie and try to predict what role Chekhov's gun will play. Welcome to Chekhov's Whatever. Hello and welcome to Chekhov's Whatever, the podcast that makes a game of movies and storytelling. I'm your host, Meg Mazeski. Here with me today to discuss the 2025 black comedy horror film, The Monkey, is Bridget Gelms. Welcome, Bridget.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to have you here. Bridget is yet another of the wonderful podcasters who I met through Lady Pod Squad, the women podcasting network. And Bridget used to have an amazing podcast called Radaptations, in which she and her sister would talk about books and their movie adaptations. Bridget, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm lamenting the end of that podcast because it
Me
was
too.
it was such a joy in my life, and we were talking a little bit before we recorded about how much we still kind of do that just like personally and don't record it anymore. But outside of the podcast, I'm a professor of English, so the fact that the theme of your show has to do with such a prominent literary device is very interesting to me. Yeah. So just kind of doing that in my spare time, and I am such a movie aficionado. So I was so happy when you reached out to me because I watch everything under the sun, and I was really excited for the opportunity to watch this wild ass movie.
It's not every day that you get to watch a haunted monkey movie.
Yeah, starring Theo James, no less. Yeah.
No less. Not Dave Franco. I thought it was Dave Franco for a moment. I can't tell them apart. And then I was like, wait a second, that's not a Franco.
They do kind of look alike now that you're mentioning it, for sure.
I do feel like this is the perfect Venn diagram of your interests. And I'm so glad that you're here to talk with me about The Monkey. As mentioned at the top of the episode, this is a 2025 black comedy horror film. It is about twin brothers who find a mysterious wind-up monkey, and a series of outrageous deaths tear their family apart. 25 years later, the monkey begins a new killing spree, forcing the estranged siblings to confront the cursed toy.
Ooh.
It might just be cursed, but I like to say cursed.
Cursed makes it feel spooky. Yes, for sure.
As we said, this movie stars Theo James, also Tatiana Maslany, Christian Convery, and Colin O'Brien. This was written and directed by Osgood, aka Oz Perkins, and the original short story was by none other than Stephen King. Also, this movie was produced by James Wan. Currently on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 79% critic score and a 57% audience score. So, Bridget, did you have any expectations going into this movie?
I did, and they were subverted, which we'll get into. But I had watched I'd seen the trailer, I think just like once, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to see this, so I'm going to avoid seeing the trailer again or seeing any, subsequent iterations of the trailer. And then, I don't know if you do this, Meg, but like, when I saw that the Rotten Tomatoes critic score was so high for a horror movie, I was like, oh, hell yeah. I'm like really excited about that. So I had an expectation that I would really like it. I also, which we'll get into a little bit later, but like I had some expectations around like the casting. I was really interested in some of the casting choices and things like that. So yeah, I was really excited to be able to see it.
Same. I, in general, gravitate towards horror films, so this caught my eye just for that fact, and also because it looked goofy as hell.
Yeah.
And I like campy horror. I like silly horror. So I felt like it was ticking a lot of boxes for me. As you said with the cast, I really like Tatiana Maslany quite a lot. Obviously best known for She-Hulk.
Yes.
No, just kidding. I hope that is not actually her legacy. Probably best known, I hope, for Orphan Black, in which she played, I think, about 7 different versions of herself. She played a clone character. Incredible actress. Her range is crazy. I just love her.
It makes me wonder if she gave Theo James any tips, given he's in a dual role here.
That is true.
Let me ask you, Meg. So had you seen Longlegs?
I had seen Longlegs, yes.
Yeah. So I was like very interested that this was coming out like so quickly. Like after,
Yes.
I feel like Longlegs hasn't been out that long. And I also was like, this feels different. Like from seeing the trailer, I was like, tonally, this feels like very different from Longlegs. So I was curious about that as well.
Totally very different because Longlegs was quite serious. And speaking to what you were saying about a critically acclaimed horror film, which is unusual, that definitely happened with Longlegs as well. And part of me wonders if maybe this was the sort of critics' goodwill toward Longlegs sort of spilling over into the monkey, or maybe just goodwill for Oz Perkins. I'm not sure.
That's a great theory, I think, because we'll get into it, but I'm not sure that I agree totally with a lot of the critical acclaim, but yeah.
Not to tip my hand early, but I would agree with that as well. I would say I'm leaning more toward the audience score in this case. But yes, I did enjoy Longlegs. And also, in general, I like James Wan. He, of course, is best known for Saw. And he also wrote and directed *Malignant*, which is one of my favorite horror movies of recent history. It's so good.
Obsessed with *Malignant*. And if we talk about the camp, camp done right, Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So considering that James Wan was attached to this movie, that signaled to me to be hopeful. Although I will admit I had a little bit of confusion and conflation before I saw this movie because for a little while I thought that Jordan Peele was attached to this.
Oh.
But I think that's just because Jordan Peele has Monkey Paw Productions and also he produced Monkey Man. So in my head I was like, oh, Jordan Peele is attached to this. That's very exciting. And then when I sat down to watch the movie, I was like, wait a second. I need to recalibrate my expectations from Jordan Peele horror to James Wan horror.
And also a chimpanzee factors very heavily in Nope.
That is true. Yeah.
But
yeah.
not a monkey, I understand. But still, yeah.
Don't come at us. We know that chimps aren't monkeys, okay?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I also just am always interested to see what people do with Stephen King adaptations because Steve is such a weirdo, right? And there's a lot of different ways I feel like you can kind of interpret what he's doing in his writing. And so it was cool to see what Oz Perkins did here. But can we get a wellness check on everyone involved? This was so unhinged.
I do have a couple of moments in my notes where I wrote, is he okay? As in the person making it, not the character, as in hey, Stephen King, you okay?
Yeah.
Oz Perkins, you okay?
Oz Perkins with your putting himself in there, right? With the facial hair as the uncle.
And then giving himself such a horrible death. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Are you a Stephen King fan in general?
I am, and I'm saying that with a little bit of a little bit of reservation. There have been some things that I've read by him where it's sort of all right, Steve, we get it, Steve, you know. But I think generally how can you not like him? He's just so prolific and has given us so many cultural touch points that credit where credit is due. We love you, Steve.
I say I'm also a fan with reservations just because I don't feel like I've actually read enough of his oeuvre to be oh, I love Stephen King. I've read a handful, but what I have read, I've enjoyed. I will admit that I started it and then gave up on it. But I might go back to it at some point.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I haven't read a lot of his more long form stuff. I've read a lot of his short stories and a couple of novellas and stuff like that. And I've read The Shining, but he's got so many big ass tomes that I haven't dug into before. So I don't know, maybe my opinion would change.
I do think that his concepts maybe survive better in a short story format than being prolonged into giant brick format.
Have you read The Monkey?
I did. Yes. Did you?
I didn't, but I am curious. I read a synopsis, so I have a little bit of a handle of how it might differ, but I'm very curious to read it now. And I want to hear what you think about that.
I think what I have to say about the short story really directly contrasts with some of my thoughts on the movie. So I'll just do a compare and contrast at the end.
I love that. Okay.
All right, but before we get into the movie, here's a quick overview of how Chekhov's Whatever works. This is a podcast where myself and the guest watch and review a movie that's new to us. We also play a game where we try to guess what Chekhov's gun will be and how it will play out later in the movie. Chekhov's gun is a plot element that must have a setup and a payoff. That setup usually happens in Act 1, and the payoff typically comes later in Act 3. A Chekhov's gun is also typically a concrete item, action, or person rather than something symbolic or thematic. And finally, a Chekhov's gun should move the plot forward in a meaningful way. We get +2 points if we correctly identify a Chekhov's gun. We also get an additional point if we correctly guess how that Chekhov's gun will pay off. And finally, we lose 1 point if we incorrectly identify a Chekhov's gun and its role. Whoever has the most points at the end of the movie wins. All right, let's get into it. The monkey opens up on a scene in a pawn shop at night. Enter Captain Petey Shelburne, played by Adam Scott. I did not know he was going to be in this movie.
Me either, and what a pleasant surprise. I mean, I basically like screamed when he showed up. I was like, what are you doing here, Adam? Oh my God.
Unfortunately, it is just a cameo. This is pretty much the one and only time we see him, but it is a welcome cameo. He's wearing his pilot uniform covered in blood, not his, organ grinder monkey in hand. He's desperate to sell the monkey back to the pawnbroker because as soon as that monkey's drumstick comes down, they're fucked. Instantly proving his point, the monkey plays the drum, and through a series of Rube Goldberg-esque chain reactions reminiscent of the Final Destination franchise, the pawnbroker is impaled and disemboweled by a spear gun. Our first of many grisly deaths.
Yes.
Adam Scott takes a flamethrower to the monkey, but this is far from the last we will see of it.
Okay, I'm obsessed with how they decided to start this movie. I feel like without this scene, it would have been so much more difficult to like just orient to like what is happening, right? Of just like the unhinged nature of the whole thing. And germane to the theme of this podcast, I just thought it was so funny that immediately, like the first shot is basically of like a harpoon. And so I just immediately was like, okay, that harpoon, like something's going to happen with this harpoon. I don't know if it counts as a Chekhov's gun, but like we get this like sweeping shot of just like weirdo weapons. And I'm like, some shit is about to go down, right?
Harpoon, a rat, a frayed rope. You know that these are all coming back. And yes, a hallmark of Chekhov's gun that I mention a lot on this podcast is simply like a zoom in on an item. If we get a close-up shot of an item, that's a signal to the audience like, hey, pay attention, this is going to come back. But not every zoom in is a Chekhov's gun, however.
Right. Yeah. And this opening scene like really had me thinking about like, okay, are these things advancing the plot, or is this just like a funny moment to show like somebody is about to get fucking murked by this harpoon, you know?
Right? And also the payoff comes so soon after the setup. I think that's the biggest disqualifier.
Yeah.
Or, well, also not really being that germane to the plot is a pretty big disqualifier as well, I would say. It's a fine line, though.
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much of that in a movie that is like, you know, Final Destination meets Jumanji or whatever. Like you're going to be seeing some everyday household items that could possibly kill you or whatever. And then that like immediately happens after you see the item.
You'll never look at a cracked mug full of vodka the same way again.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So in this opening scene, immediately got a little overwhelmed. You know, I was like, do I want to name any of these as a Chekhov's whatever? I didn't. I was like, let me just sit in this stew for a second and see what's going on. So that's where I kind of landed with this opening scene.
I think that's the right call. Sit in this grisly little stew for a while.
Yeah.
We cut from this opening scene to our main character, Hal Shelburne, as played by Theo James as an adult, giving a voiceover of his childhood in the late 90s. As a child, Hal is played by Christian Convery. Hal is the son of the pilot we saw in the opening scene, and he's also the younger of two twin brothers. Hal and Bill may be twins, but they're anything but close. Bill, the technically older brother, is mean and petty yet popular, while Hal is lonely and withdrawn. And it seems like the only thing they have in common, besides their looks, of course, is how much they love their mom. And we can tell them apart because Hal is always wearing glasses.
Very necessary, right?
Yes. Hal also occasionally fantasizes about making himself an only child, let's say, by, for example, crushing Bill's head with his mom's personalized bowling ball.
Yeah, can we talk about this for a second? I just want to say I have such a pet peeve about like bullying like in movies, like the way that that's like portrayed. And I'm not sure like how that plays out in the short story, though I do know from other Stephen King stuff, it's like he loves a bully and he
Oh,
loves
yes.
writing a bully. Just what I feel like is just so stereotypical. And so immediately when we're like orienting to Hal and Bill's relationship, I was like, oh, I don't want this, you know?
Yes, I will say that already the movie is quite diverging from the short story
Oh.
in the sense that tonally, because I would say in the movie, pretty much everyone is unlikable, whether that means they're like mean or petty or a bully or vindictive. Whereas in the short story, the Hal character, he's complicated and troubled,
Hmm.
but everyone loves each other. There
Hmm.
are a couple of boys. He has two sons in the book instead of just one son.
Oh.
And one's a little bit older, but he's not a bully. He's just, a teen.
Uh-huh.
And there seems to be goodwill towards everyone, towards each other in the book. Whereas in this movie, it's like everyone hates each other.
Yeah, everyone hates each other and like they're fantasizing about murdering each other, which I
Yes.
also just feel like is very weird, a very weird thing to do, even if you are a bully. So yeah, I just immediately was like, oh God, okay, we're gonna have to suffer through this. But yeah.
Yes. Something I found interesting about the bullying in here, but also is kind of like, I don't know why they did that. And also, I don't know if it added anything to the movie. But we also see that Hal is getting bullied at school by his classmates. And I don't know if you noticed this, but almost all, if not all, of his bullies are girls.
I
Did
did
you notice
notice.
this?
Of course I did. Yes.
Yes.
Like interesting.
And it's like, is this an attempt to put a spin on the bullying narrative? But if so, what is it trying to say? Because I think we can agree that there's usually not much girl on boy bullying in school.
Right.
Certainly there's girl on girl bullying and boy on boy bullying. I don't know. I'm a
Right.
millennial. Maybe times are different. But also this is in the 90s, so we're supposed to look at this from a 90s perspective. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure what we were meant to take away from that.
Me either. And I don't know if it's like really fair of me to say this given like pretty much everybody in this movie is terrible and awful, but like, there's only a handful of women characters in this film and outside of the mom who they both like really idolize,
Mhm.
it's slim pickings for any women
It's
who are
true.
like doing something nice or good or right? So I was like, yeah, what are we meant to think about that bullying situation outside of just like how awful for a man to feel
To
dehumanized
be
by a woman.
emasculated by a
Yes.
girl. That's the
Yes.
worst thing in the world. Yeah.
Right, right. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, but the main bully is played by Oz Perkins' daughter.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, who is also she is so funny in Long Legs. She has a scene in Long Legs where she's the hardware store clerk that encounters Long Legs and is sort of like just
Oh, yes.
weirded out by him.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But yes, in this flashback, Hal also explains that his dad was a deadbeat who abandoned his family, but he did send home weird knickknacks. And one day, as Hal and Bill are going through their father's belongings, they discover the organ grinder monkey. Bill claims the monkey as his because he is the older brother after all, and he turns the key in the monkey's back, but nothing seems to happen.
Okay, this is where I have my first set of guesses.
I do as well. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
We've got Chekhov's boomerang and Chekhov's bowling ball. And my guess was that these were going to be weapons used against the monkey. It had not yet
Yes.
occurred to me that the monkey would be using these weapons against other people, but I was like, oh, for sure somebody's going to chuck that boomerang at that monkey or drop the bowling ball on the monkey. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's where I landed with those.
100%. I also had Chekhov's boomerang. And just like you, I think its use is going to be pretty straightforward as a weapon, but I did also think it was going to be used as an implement against the monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Later, the boys' babysitter takes them to a teppanyaki restaurant, a sort of Benihana type place. The monkey, left behind in the car, ominously brings down his drumsticks. The babysitter and the hibachi chef are flirting, but their dalliance is tragically cut short, literally, when with a swipe of his knife, the hibachi chef accidentally decapitates her.
Mm-hmm. How does that happen?
Uh, outside of anime logic, I'm not really sure how this does happen.
Yeah. And this is actually, I've got a couple more here,
Okay.
Meg. So the first one, well, maybe this is where we can get into like some of the confusions around like I was like, I don't know if this really does constitute like the trope of
Mhm.
Chekhov's whatever, but there's talk about how like the dad left for cigarettes and like never came back, the dad disappeared, blah blah
Mhm.
blah, right? We as the viewers have this knowledge that he has done battle with this monkey at some point
Yes.
in time. And so the fact that they're all talking about how like he disappeared and no one kind of really knows what happened to him made me think that we were eventually going to see how he died, right? Like part of me was like, okay, Chekhov's missing dad, I guess. It's like mentioned. I really thought that like we were gonna get some flashback to like the flamethrower exploding in his face, some
Yes.
like Wile E. Coyote ass death, for the dad or something. So I did kind of note that at this point in time because there was like a lot of talk about how like the dad's not here, and then this leads me to my second one, the mention of the mom and the babysitter to the boys before they go to the hibachi restaurant. They both like make this joke of like, no fire, boys, like don't set a fire, don't light
Oh,
a
yes.
fire.
Hmm.
So I was like, that flamethrower. It just kept
Ah,
me thinking about the
yes.
the dad and the flamethrower, and I thought maybe Chekhov's flamethrower, is that going to return later because there was all this talk of fire.
I think that that is a fair guess. It does follow the format of like there's a breadcrumb being laid, or at least in the scene you interpreted that there was a breadcrumb. This was going to be the setup here, this mention of fire and flame, or the mention of the father. And going back to a previous episode, in the Craven the Hunter episode, one of my guesses was Chekhov's dead mother, because they kept alluding to this dead mother. And I was like, I think that she's not really dead and she's going to come back later in the movie, blah, blah, blah. So yes, I do think that follows the format of a Chekhov's gun.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of a diversion. I just have to share. I recently binged all four of the Bridget Jones Diary movies. I'd never
Oh,
seen
yes.
them before. It was like my
Uh-huh.
first time seeing them. I loved them. So that's something that I would like to plug at the end of the episode is just watch those movies because they're really good. Um, but in one of them, I think in the second or no, in the third one, Hugh Grant is like this central character in this series of movies, and he is sort of the third one opens with his funeral, but there's all this
Mm.
talk about how like his body was never found. So the entire movie, I'm like waiting for Hugh Grant to just like pop back up, right? But that's
Uh-huh.
kind of, and he doesn't.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I would have expected that too.
and he doesn't. And so when stuff like that happens, when there's like mention, of like a dead character who's kind of central to the plot
Mhm.
or whatever, it really does raise your suspicions of like,
Yes.
okay, like they're said that they're dead, but there's strange circumstances around their death or whatever. I feel like just as viewers, we're conditioned to feel suspicious about that.
Absolutely. And I think that goes to the heart of sort of the concept of Chekhov's gun, is that it became a concept because there is that audience expectation. And once you have the breadcrumb or the setup, there's often disappointment if there's not a payoff, because we have been conditioned to be like, oh, I noticed that. It's going to come back in this way, and then I'm going to feel good about predicting it. So then when there's not a payoff, you're like, hey, wait a second.
Yeah,
Like, you have to have the gun go off.
totally. And I think that that's particularly predominant in like the horror genre because there's,
Absolutely.
like twists and the element of surprise is such a central part of horror. And it really makes me lament like I don't know, like the time before The Sixth Sense, when
Yes.
we could just be like dumb and like watching the movie and genuinely be surprised. But now it's like we're looking all the time for
Hmm.
the twist or objects that are going to come back into play, etc. So it's interesting to think about how like audience expectations have just shifted as more and more like creativity emerges out of the genre.
Hmm. Hmm. And also, I think that there is a purposeful attempt often on the filmmaker's part to make the audience feel smart, because that does make the audience feel good about the movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, also speaking for myself, I'm usually pretty pleased if I, guess a clue in a mystery or something like that. So
Yeah.
it is an interesting way to get audience engagement.
Totally. Totally.
So after the poor babysitter is decapitated anime style with the slow slide of the head off of her neck, we cut to her funeral and perhaps the most inept eulogy ever.
My God, what is with this priest? Oh my God.
I know, right? I think this really speaks to the whole movie where like no one in this movie is likable. Everyone, no one gives a shit really about anything. It's very nihilistic in a lot of ways.
And honestly, if you had any doubts prior to this scene, like you would watch this priest and be like, oh, I'm watching a cartoon. Like that's this
Yes.
movie. This is like not a serious thing. Like this is
No.
we're like through the looking glass and that's just what's happening.
Yes, and this is followed by perhaps the worst pep talk ever when Lois tries to console her boys with the wisdom that everybody dies. I will say, Tatiana Maslany, I found her to be a likable character. She was a bit, of a hard truth teller to her boys, but you can see that she loves them. So I did like Tatiana Maslany, but
Oh
also
my
I just
gosh.
like her in general.
Yeah, and her line delivery of that's
So
that
good.
yeah, and that kind of I guess a little bit of a spoiler, like that monologue that she gives to them under the tree like turns out to be just like the crux of the film, right?
Yes,
Like the whole like
absolutely.
thesis of the film. And her delivery of it is just so like engaging. Like while
Yes.
she was talking, I just was really getting like sucked into what she was saying. And that also was just a very memorable part of the trailer when I saw it too, this line of like
hmm
everybody dies. And that almost kind of set up an expectation for me too of like, oh, okay, like literally everybody in this movie is gonna die,
hmm
which didn't quite happen. I guess we'll talk about it as we get there.
Almost.
But yeah, almost. But her delivery of that monologue was just like masterclass of acting. I thought she's incredible in this.
Her line delivery is great. It put in someone else's hands, it probably wouldn't have had the same impact.
Agreed.
She does, however, successfully cheer them up when she suggests that they should do some dancing. So they're sort of cutting a rug at home. And Hal says in voiceover that this was the happiest day of his life. Later at school, Hal, like we said, is being bullied by a bunch of girls. And the bullying only worsens when he brings the monkey to class with him. His bullies pelt him with bananas and he storms home covered in banana mush. He's like more banana bread than boy at this point. It's just like
Like a comical amount of like mashed up bananas. It's like, sir, why didn't you just brush some of that off on your way home? What is
yes.
happening?
Hal is at his wit's end at this point, and he's had this simmering rage for his brother this whole time. So he winds the key in the monkey and he wishes his brother Bill dead. But as the monkey plays, blood begins to pour from his mother Lois's eyes and ears, and she collapses violently to the ground, dead. And Bill witnesses this whole terrible scene. This is where Hal figures out the mechanics of how the monkey works. He says that when the drumsticks come down, the monkey chooses who it wants to kill. It doesn't take requests. It has a mind of its own, and no one can control it. As the back of its box says, turn the key and see what happens. Indeed.
Indeed. Yeah. I am always so fascinated by scenes in horror movies where you're like learning the rules of the thing,
Yes.
And so it was cool that there actually were kind of rules to this
Mhm.
instead of it, even though like there is like a randomness to the way that the monkey works, we're finally kind of learning a little bit about the functionality of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how this is adapted from the short story because obviously a lot of this information about the rules of the monkey is just, it's just on the page in the story. So in this case, we have to have voiceover or the characters talking in dialogue to each other about like, how do you think this works? But since at this point in the movie, it's sort of a secret and Hal isn't opening it up to his brother about how he believes the monkey works, then we get this little voiceover that's like, hey guys, this is what's going on.
Right. Yeah, and it does kind of create it like reminds you as the viewer of like, oh, we're like eventually going to get to a point where this guy like grows up and has this,
Yes.
grizzled orientation to the world because of this goddamn monkey.
That damn monkey, that damn dirty ape.
Yes, exactly. Now, Meg, remind me, I don't remember if it happens in this scene or later, but this is where I think around here where we learned that the mom died of what they call a boomerang aneurysm.
Yes, correct. In voiceover, it is this scene. it's her funeral. And yes, she was killed by a boomerang aneurysm.
Now, did you look up a boomerang aneurysm?
I did not. Did you? I thought it was just made up. I just assumed it was made up. I guess I shouldn't have made that assumption.
It is. Like, I Googled
Okay.
it and it was like, that's not actually a thing. And I was like, huh, that's so curious. I mean, obviously a callback to the boomerang
Yes.
in some way, but I was still kind of like, why would you call it that? What is happening? I don't know. It confused me.
Yeah, there's many instances of this in this movie where there just seems to be callbacks, I think just for Oz Perkins' own amusement or something. There's a lot of things that I'm just like, okay, well, I see that that's a callback. I don't see why. Like, for example, like there's a parrot in the background at some point, and earlier in the movie there was like parrot peanut butter, I think it was, or jam.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, that's also a callback. I don't know. I guess maybe they're just Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Maybe.
For like no purpose though. I guess
no
maybe,
reason.
yeah, maybe to like throw you off or something. But yeah, there's a very strange.
Yeah, or like their last name is Shelburne, and at a later scene, the monkey's like in a shell, kind of like Venus, Birth of
Stop.
Venus.
Oh
And
my God. I did not even make that connection. That's so funny.
I'm sure there were many more that I did not catch.
Yeah.
At this point, since Hal is convinced that the evil monkey has in fact killed his mom, he takes a meat cleaver to the monkey and chops it up into pieces and throws it out. The boys move away with their Aunt Ida and their Uncle Chip, played by Oz Perkins, to their home in Maine. Also worth mentioning that Stephen King's home is Maine, and most of his stories are set in Maine, or at least a bunch of them are.
One of my favorite Conan O'Brien bits from like back when Conan like had his late show. This was like pre him like taking over the Tonight Show, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
They had this bit once when I was a kid where it was during the time when America was like issuing those like special quarters that like each
Oh,
one like
yes.
showcased a different state. Conan did this bit where he would like show the different states and then he would, they would have like a joke slogan of like, oh, this is
Uh-huh.
what they're going to put on the quarter. And I'll never forget that the one for Maine, like the joke was that people from Maine were saying, Stephen King, please stop writing about our state. It's like hurting our local economy. So who doesn't associate Maine with Stephen King?
I think Maine should embrace that. That should be their slogan.
Lean in, Maine.
Stephen King lives here.
Yes, exactly. It's like, it's a cool thing to be associated with, I feel.
I think so.
Yeah.
However, Maine is not safe from the monkey. The monkey does find the boys there. It appears outside the home mysteriously one night. Bill wants to experiment with the monkey. He wonders if maybe their mom turned the key and that's why she died. Hal is clearly feeling guilty about having caused their mom's death, but he doesn't confess what he did to Bill, and Bill decides to turn the key despite Hal's warnings. We smash cut to Uncle Chip's funeral.
This was the biggest laugh of the film from me. This was
Me too.
The comedic timing was incredible.
Yes.
Like we're getting this unhinged speech from the uncle to, I think, Hal about how him and the aunt are swingers and like they're going to try to do their best to raise them, but they probably won't do a good job. And then the next thing we know, he's super fucking dead.
Yes. It almost has a Gilligan's cut. I mean, Bill doesn't say like, what's the worst that could happen, but it's sort of implied. Bill's like, let's see what happens.
Yes.
Smash cut, Uncle Chip's funeral.
Yes. Yes.
It turns out poor Uncle Chip was trampled to death by a stampede of wild horses in his sleeping bag. And apparently the coroner said that it looked like someone had drop kicked a cherry pie. That was also pretty funny to me. Yes, the cut, the segue, and that line were all probably peak humor for me in this movie.
Yeah. Like
A little bit
legitimately
downhill
funny.
from here.
A little
Yes,
bit downhill.
legitimately funny.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dear listener, if you haven't seen this film, you could probably gather from our conversation that like it's like comically gory. And yeah, it really does look like a smashed pie.
It does.
It does. It's a very, very Looney Tunes style. Like every death I feel like is just so goofball.
I like to call it Monty Python level violence, like spurts of gushing blood and limbs falling off and
Yeah.
exploding body. It's absurd to an extreme degree.
I don't know that I was like prepared for like the level of
I was
that.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. That's the thing. Like I am in general pretty squeamish about violence. Like I will just never watch Hostel. That's does not appeal to me in any way whatsoever. Like I don't like torture porn movies. I don't typically like slasher movies, although Scream and such are an exception. But when the violence tips over into Looney Tunes style violence, into so absurd and ridiculous you can't take it seriously, it's like, yeah, it reaches like a breaking point where it's like, this isn't gross anymore, it's just funny and
Yeah.
goofy. Although that being said, this movie is still rather disgusting.
Yes, very disgusting. And I'm not sure that it like, I mean, with the exception of Uncle Chip's death, I feel like I'm not sure how successful Oz was at like executing the camp, like the promise of the
Yes.
camp. Like I think it just maybe is a little too off. It's not like John Waters' camp. It's like I don't know. Like I can't quite put my finger on it, but there was just something amiss for me.
I agree. I don't know if I can quite put my finger on it either. I think it might even just be that there wasn't enough restraint shown. Like
Hmm.
it loses its shock value and it loses its uniqueness, I guess, the more you do it. So
Hmm.
by the end of the movie, you're kind of like, okay, we get it, Oz, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, more of the exploding bodies for no discernible reason.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like literally beating a dead horse.
Literally, yeah. And a horse does show up at the end. I also I think was just kind of surprised because, Longlegs is not funny. It's like not meant to be funny. There are
Hmm.
camp elements in it, mostly just through whatever Nicolas Cage is doing. And I'm not sure if
Yes.
that was, an execution of like Oz Perkins or how much of that was Nick Cage and how much of that was
Hmm.
Oz Perkins. And not that like directors have to like stay in the same lane that they were in previously, but I think just like coming off of Longlegs, I was like really surprised at how just like fucking dumb this like movie is,
It's true. After watching The Monkey, I did revisit Longlegs mentally because I was like, well, I did quite like Longlegs, whereas I didn't particularly like The Monkey. And I did ask myself, is what I liked about Longlegs Nicolas Cage? And I think perhaps the answer was yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, okay, actually the through line between these movies, the bad through line is maybe Osgood Perkins.
Yeah, I maybe feel the same way. It did inspire me to want to watch Longlegs again, which I did
Hmm.
see in the theater twice. So I have seen it multiple times. But, once you start to like really think about like the promise of that movie, it immediately starts to kind of fall apart, like the logic of
Hmm.
it. The thing that's kind of interesting about the monkey is that like it doesn't necessarily have to be logical because it's
Right.
like it's mythological, right? Like it's yeah, there's all this stuff that it doesn't have to make sense, which I think is maybe better for Oz Perkins, but
That's true.
yeah.
I don't have an expectation of a evil monkey movie making a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm willing to be forgiving as far as plot elements go.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree.
The boys realize that they can't destroy this evil monkey, but they can try to contain it. So they throw it down a well. And for a while, this seems to work because we cut to 25 years later. This time we are inside Aunt Ida's home, and she dies through yet another series of unfortunate events.
Understatement of the year. This poor woman. I have Chekhov's fish hooks.
The
uh
Chekhov's fish.
listed here, right? And I definitely was like, as soon as they showed those fish hooks, I was like, Aunt Ida will die by those fish hooks, which didn't quite happen, right? Like
Yes,
it
they did
escalated
contribute to the
beyond.
whole thing.
It did. It was like, yeah, the first straw, and I was not prepared for how quickly things escalated for her.
In the words of Ron Burgundy, that escalated quickly.
A man was on fire, right? Like Aunt Ida.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes, so since we are 25 years in the future, Hal is all grown up now. He's now played by Theo James, and it turns out it's his 1 week a year when he gets to see his son. Or should I say the 1 week a year when he chooses to see his son.
My God, Meg, leave it to a man to use a cursed monkey as an excuse to just be a deadbeat, right? Like I was like, Theo James, get real, get real.
A man would rather blame a cursed monkey than go to therapy.
Seriously. And actually, like, can we just talk for a second about like the choice to cast Theo James? Because I want to talk about it.
Yes, please.
Okay, so like, uh, yeah, like Chekhov's Theo James's bone structure. Like, part of me was like, I'm so interested that he was cast in, like, to me, not saying that he himself is a Chekhov's gun, but I was like, it feels very like intentional and purposeful that Theo James is cast and not like
Hmm.
Dane DeHaan or like you
Sure.
know, with respect to Mr. DeHaan, like, and other, you know, character actors
I'm
with
sure he has
interesting
his
faces.
fans.
Yeah, like, but I just think of Theo James as like he's like this Adonis, like he's
Yes.
this very attractive guy, and his face just like doesn't fit the character to me, right? Like just this bullied kid who's like just like a fucking loser as an
Yeah.
adult. So even before we get to him, like the reveal that he grows up to be Theo James, knowing that he was in this movie, I was like, this feels purposeful and intentional. I
Mm.
can't like I don't know why. And he's a great actor, right? And I
Mhm.
thought he was good in this and all that, but it felt weird to me that they would cast somebody so like perfect looking.
That's a good point because if someone is so perfect looking in a story where it's just supposed to be about an average person, that can bring you out of the story a little bit. Or, like you said, it makes you try to predict that maybe there is a reason why they've cast this very attractive man. Like
Yeah.
maybe it is relevant to the plot in some way. We do get a throwaway line from the realtor, Barbara, about how pretty he is. And I think that's
Yes.
the only mention, however, of that he is, in fact, a quite attractive man.
And no one is interacting with him as if he looks like Theo James. Like I just was like so distracted by that. But yeah, I
Uh,
mean it turns out, you know, he was cast for whatever reason. It wasn't really like that purposeful, but
yes.
it just struck me as like interesting. I'm like, where's like the Willem Dafoe, whoever the current Willem Dafoe is or something like for this movie.
What's which Skarsgård is it who plays
Oh,
Pennywise?
Bill.
Bill. Okay, yes.
Yeah. Yes,
Yes.
yes, we need Nosferatu in the monkey for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's no stranger to Stephen King work. Let's get him in here.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, Theo James was great and playing a dual
Yeah.
role is, you know, very difficult and it was funny that they kind of tried to like ug him up a little bit
Yeah.
for the bill.
They're
Like
like,
they
I don't know, give him bad hair.
give him bad hair. Yeah. Yeah.
There might be a wider conversation here of just how no one's allowed to look unusual anymore. Hollywood has this same face problem going on among men and women, especially with everyone getting the same plastic surgeries and the same cheek fillers that just everyone looks hot, but they also all look the same and there aren't like unusual looking people anymore. I was complaining a little bit in the companion movie about the overuse of veneers and I was like, bring back weird teeth. So yeah.
Weird teeth. And not even, I mean, give us just real teeth. Like I'll settle
Real
for
teeth.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I want weird teeth. I want real teeth. I want yellowed teeth. I want crooked teeth. I want a snaggle tooth. Please.
So yeah, on the one hand, I'm not at all complaining about looking at Theo James for a couple hours. But on the other hand, yeah, let's mix it up a little.
Yeah, it did kind of strike me. Like I was like, okay, what is this hot man doing in the gas station right now? You know?
Right. Oh, maybe it's like a makeover because he's wearing the glasses, so therefore he's not hot. The glasses make
got it.
him unhot.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
like a she's all
exactly.
that situation. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. uh, yeah, as it turns out, he has been purposely keeping his teenage son, Petey, at arm's length this whole time because he wants to keep him safe from the evil monkey. He does not want his son to inherit his family's twisted legacy. And I'm just like, okay, come on, dude. Like, if you're really that concerned for your son's safety, why do you think 1 week a year is like the threshold for which he will not be put into danger?
Right? I mean, like, wouldn't the logic of what it has already done just lead you to know that it doesn't, like, distance doesn't matter? Like,
Exactly. It'll find you where you
yes,
are no matter what.
right.
And also, I feel like when Petey got to a certain age, he could have attempted to tell him the truth. I mean, if we're working within the confines of this universe, maybe the reaction would be like, I believe you, Dad. Or maybe it would be like, you're crazy, Dad. And then his ex would be like, you're never seeing your son again, but but I feel like there should have been an attempt made much earlier in this movie for Hal to explain to his son what was going on.
Something. I mean, my God, even when we get to like the 1 week, it's like they're in this like motel and he's just like kind of mean to his kid. I'm like, why even spend time with him at all? Like, this is weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, why even spend a week a year? Might as well just never see him at all. I feel anyway. I feel like it's just being even more cruel to the son.
I know. And then like, what does it matter if he is privy to your family tree or not? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no point in him lying about like, I'm not going to tell you your grandma's name. It's like, okay, that keeps him safe from the monkey. How?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, do better, Hal.
Do better. The monkey transcends space and time, right? So yeah, it's
exactly.
No one's safe. No one is safe.
So Hal goes to pick up his teenage son, Petey, as played by Colin O'Brien. And when he picks up Petey, his ex's partner / parenting guru, played by Elijah Wood, tells Hal that he's going to adopt Petey as his own son. This is giving Adam Scott a run for his money as far as cameos in this movie go for me. I love Elijah Wood. I love to see him randomly pop up.
Yes, and he's my favorite little strange weirdo that I was like, okay, like some weird shit's about to go down because Elijah Wood is here. I mean, it was like a real record scratch moment. I had no clue he was in this movie. I was like, what are you doing here?
Speaking of adaptations, my husband absolutely loves the Lord of the Rings books, and he was one of those sort of like book purists. So he always really hated Elijah Wood being cast as Frodo, and he sort of like carried this hatred forward.
Oh my God.
So, I know. Just to put this out here, I disagree 1000%. I love Elijah Wood. I love the movies. The adaptations are so good, but my husband was not happy about this cameo.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And it's also like really interesting that like, since being Frodo, like what do you do after that, right? Like you're at the apex of like people, that's what people are going to know you for. And I just love that his career choices are like, I'm going to cameo in The Monkey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of stuff I love that for him.
It really parallels Daniel Radcliffe. It's like, once you're going to be known as Harry Potter forever, what do you do? And the answer is, I don't know, Swiss Army Man, I guess. Just like, let's just do weird shit.
Yeah, Guns Akimbo. Yeah, obsessed. And it's also like really funny, like the nature of the character that Elijah Wood is playing, like just this like weirdo, like something's off in the sauce with this guy, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
Once again, not particularly likable.
No, and I had two Chekhov's whatevers from this scene.
Perfect.
Chekhov's parenting book.
Oh.
We see Hal like reading this. It's called Fatherhood 8. It's like the 8th book in a series. And, maybe it was just like the fact that it was like the 8th. I don't know what it was, but it like immediately stood out to me as like, okay, like I don't know how, but that parenting book is going to come into play later. Mm-hmm. We come to learn that like it's really just because Elijah Wood has written a bunch of books about parenting and it didn't have a lot of consequence. But I was like, right. Chekhov's parenting book, it is very notable that he's like reading a parenting book.
Yes, and it was very prominently displayed in that scene as well.
And like you were saying, the camera lingers on it. I was like, this is going to be important. The other thing that I had here, this was like my favorite one, I think, of the movie. Chekhov's jet skis.
Oh, I didn't even see a jet ski. That's exciting.
So when Hal like rocks up to this like nice Tudor style mansion that they're living in or whatever, there's like I think 2 jet skis like parked in the driveway. Not a lake in sight, right? There's some jet skis here, and I think he even like mutters under his breath like, oh, like he sees the jet skis and he's like douchebag or something like that. So I was like, Chekhov's jet skis.
Yeah. The
new dad, who later was revealed to me to be Elijah Wood, will die by a jet ski. I was like, for sure that's going to happen.
This really makes me wonder now if maybe that was a deleted scene or something, because I feel like that is a huge dropped ball.
Why show the jet ski?
Why show the jet ski?
Yeah. And it was also just making me reflect on like how like it's interesting the bad rap that jet skis kind of have in our culture of like if you see especially if somebody owns a jet ski, it's not just about like
Yeah.
riding the jet ski, but if you own
Right.
a jet ski, it just means like you're a douchebag, right?
The only exception is Owen Wilson's character in the Loki series. His entire goal is to ride a jet ski, and he's quite charming.
Yeah, and that's very heartwarming for sure. Exceptions to every rule, and apologies to Chekhov's whatever's listeners who own jet skis. But it did stick out to me that I was like, someone will die by that jet ski, and it's probably going to be Elijah Wood.
I think that's a great guess. Osgood Perkins, take note.
Right, hire me, dude. I've got punch ups for your script.
We cut away from Elijah Wood et al. To the estate sale at Aunt Ida's house, where a long-haired teen named Ricky buys the monkey. For some reason, this monkey reminds him of his dad, and he wants to keep it, but he already has plans to sell it to a local eccentric who has an ad out for a toy monkey. I know I said earlier that I wasn't going to hold an Evil Monkey movie to high plot standards, but
Hit me with it.
but it is at this point where I just feel like the way the narrative unfolds gets rather clumsy from here on out, because there's a lot of cutting between timelines and scenes and characters where I'm like, this really just could have been done in a more linear fashion. Like it gets a little confusing when it doesn't need to be, because I'm like, who is this teen? What's going on? Like, it wasn't even immediately clear to me that this estate sale was Aunt Ida's estate sale. I mean, I guess it was. And maybe that should have been more obvious to me. But, you know, there's just this sudden cut without much context. And I'm like, okay, like, where are we? And I feel like this happens a lot with the Ricky character.
Agreed. Like you could completely remove him from this film and it would still make the same like sense. Like say, you know,
Yes.
like you really don't need him, and it does add this kind of convoluted element to like motivating factors and like different things that are revealed in the second half of the movie.
Yes.
And I agree with you about the timeline stuff because I was confused. I thought Aunt Ida died when they were still living with her.
I thought that as well. That was my initial impression.
Yeah.
And I actually had to rewind to double check. And it does, in fact, say 25 years later.
Oh, no way.
But I did not catch that the first time like you. And I also thought that she had died when they were children. So, yes, the narrative, the plot, as far as how it unfolds, just gets quite muddy.
Yeah.
Starting in the second act. Yeah.
I also kind of wonder, that's interesting about the little title card that I missed. I wonder, like, with a movie like this, to what degree does it turn the viewer into like just a passive lump of a person? Because you get to like, you get halfway through this movie and it's like, oh, okay, this is so unserious that like
Yes.
I can very sort of glaze over a little bit and just let it wash over me very
That's
passively.
true.
So I wonder if that's what was happening. But yeah, like the Ricky stuff was weird.
Yeah, it's not a movie that really rewards close watching. Because like we were saying, it's like, yeah, you pick up little Easter eggs and stuff, but to what end?
To what
purpose?
end? Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. Like it just feels like there's a lot of spaghetti thrown at the wall here.
True. A lot of the gore does look like spaghetti thrown at a wall.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Hal and Petey are staying at a shabby roadside motel when Petey asks Hal a bunch of questions about Hal's family for a family tree school project. Hal is evasive and cagey. He lies about having no siblings, and he doesn't share any information about his mother, Lois. He doesn't want to put his son in danger by revealing too much. But again, like we said, like, how would this put him in danger? Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
That night, he's awoken from a nightmare about the monkey, and he wakes up in a sweat and turns down the heat, and we see the AC unit ominously rumble to life on the roof.
Now, did you clock this as a Chekhov's whatever?
I did not write it down as a Chekhov's gun because this is a real like through line in this movie and like in Final Destination type movies where it's like, this is going to come back. It's going to have some Rube Goldberg-esque thing to do in enacting someone's death. I just felt like the payoff was going to come immediately. So that's why I'm like, it's foreshadowing. We know something's going to happen with this AC unit that they are zooming in on that's rumbling on top of the roof. Maybe it's going to fall off and crush someone's head, Something that I mentioned in a previous episode, which is sort of helping me personally define how I see a Chekhov's gun is I feel like maybe a Chekhov's gun is often more subtextual than straight up overt text. And I feel like in this case, the AC unit is overt text. You know, you're like, that's coming back.
Totally. I totally agree with you. And I feel like it was at this point in the film where I was like, yeah, unless, like, you could say that, like, fucking everything in this movie is a Chekhov's gun, right? Yeah. But there is something temporal about it. Like, I'm starting to realize, like, oh, okay, like, if something has like immediate effect, like the AC unit does, then like I don't think that should count, right? So I kind of stopped like listing all of these like potential weapons things because it didn't feel substantive, like what you're saying, you know?
I agree. And so the playwright Anton Chekhov, he talked about this concept. He didn't call it Chekhov's gun. I don't think he named it that himself.
Can you imagine if he was like, you know, if you were like Meg's podcast and this is, you know.
He's like, this is going to be important. I can tell. He had a real ego. No, but he talked about this narrative concept many times. So it's a little bit hard to define because even when he himself was talking about this concept, he used different words and different scenarios to describe it. But he did say more than once in his view that like if you put a gun on stage in Act 1, it has to go off by Act 3. So using his own words, we do have this, like you said, temporal element. Like there should be a remove between the setup and the payoff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think too, like what you were sharing about more often than not, it's like subtextual. It's not like, you know, hitting you over the head. This is not a subtextual movie. This is a very literal movie. Like they're showing you the AC unit because literally it's about to kill somebody.
Yes.
And so it's interesting because I feel like there was probably more opportunity that Oz Perkins could have capitalized on to incorporate more subtext, but it's just not that kind of movie.
No, exactly. Yeah, and also just taking the AC unit, for example, like it does kill this poor woman. This woman dies. But if we zoom out a little bit more, it's like, well, let's imagine that the AC unit didn't exist in this movie. And by extension, this particular woman did not exist in this movie. Like, would the plot change materially? And the answer to that is no. You know, it's like, yes, it's another of many shock factor deaths, but this one particular person dying does not change the trajectory of the plot in any way. So also considering that, I'm like, I don't think it's a Chekhov's gun. So.
It really just felt like an opportunity for Oz Perkins to like blow up a mannequin and cover Theo James with a bunch of red goo, right?
Yes,
like, 'cause not only does this lady die, like she fucking explodes. Like it's crazy. I was like, what am I watching? I almost texted you and was like, Meg, what is this? What is going on here?
I know I often feel like I have to apologize to my guests. It's like, I'm sorry that I forced you to watch this movie.
No, I will say, and you know, tipping my hand here, like I do think this movie is worth a watch, but probably just one on like a Sunday afternoon when you're folding laundry or whatever, you know.
If your expectations are low, or if you know what to expect, if you know what you're getting into, I think it can be a rewarding enough watch.
Yeah.
But yes, while the AC unit is rattling away, Hal gets a call from Bill. Bill tells him about Aunt Ida's freakish demise, and he also commands Hal to go to the house and deal with the monkey, presumably the cause of Aunt Ida's death. While this conversation is going on, the AC unit falls off the roof of the motel and into a puddle of water near the motel pool, electrifying it. Hal tries to stop a sexy bikini-clad lady from diving into the pool, but he's too late, and as soon as she makes contact with the water, she explodes like a water balloon. It's ridiculous.
Explodes? Like, does that happen when you get electrocuted?
I don't think that happens, no.
New fear unlocked. Yeah.
Also, you know, we get some girl bullies and we get a woman in a red bikini who explodes. So, you know, good representation for women.
Absolutely love it. 10 out of 10. No notes. Lord. You know, I think this scene too is like maybe this is like one of the things where it was like contributing to my dissatisfaction with this movie. It's like the Final Destination movies exist. So we've seen we've seen
And do it better.
yes, like we've seen this before, but we've seen it done better and more interestingly.
Yes.
So I don't know. This felt very Final Destination, this scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a new Final Destination movie coming out soon, by the way.
Stop. That's
Yeah, Final
exciting.
Destination Origins, I think it's called. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Hal is understandably freaked out by being covered in the red goo, and he decides he does have to do something about that monkey. But first, he has to get Petey back home and back to safety. But Petey is adamant about seeing this through with Hal. He knows about the upcoming adoption, and he wants to make the most of his remaining time they have together as father and son. So Hal reluctantly agrees to let Petey come along with him to fight the evil monkey.
Completely negating everything
Yep.
that he was afraid of before. He's like, come
You
along,
know.
son. Yeah.
Maybe makes one wonder why he's been avoiding his son for the past, I would say, 15 to 16 years or however old Petey is.
Who knows? I mean, Stephen King is like obsessed with bad dads, you know?
That's true.
So it just feels like an imperative, kind of. I don't know.
Yes, very much the theme of the short story itself. So I guess it makes sense that it would carry over into the movie. But before we find out what happens with that dang evil monkey, let's take a quick commercial break to hear a few ads. And we're back. Hal and Petey drive to Maine. Along the way, Petey points out a flyer he picked up for a local skydiving business that does weddings. I have Chekhov skydiving.
Well done.
Oh, thank you.
I don't. And I'm pissed at myself that I didn't notice this as like, you know, as being weird or important.
This was one of those things where I was like, I'm not sure if this is just a gag, but something about it made me think this is going to have a payoff later. I think maybe it was because of the zoom in on the flyer that says we do weddings.
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly sure what I thought the payoff would be, but I think somehow Hal and Petey will use the skydiving plane to escape from the monkey.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like you didn't think it would be like death related, like somebody's parachute doesn't open or
At
something.
this point, I probably should have. But I was like, they'll need to use the plane somehow. Yeah, that was my thought anyway. They should have pushed the monkey out of the plane.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And then he'd like pull out a little parachute or something like that. No, I love that you were trying to kind of think outside of this box that Osgood Perkins has us in of just like, you know, weird deaths all the time. That's all that this movie is offering you. Nothing else. Move along.
I think maybe I was just trying too hard to try to make an actual Chekhov's gun happen. And Oz Perkins is like, Chekhov's guns aren't happening.
No, they
Sorry,
feel
just weird deaths.
Feels like a real rare thing for this film, right?
It does. Oh boy. At Ida's home, they meet Barbara, the realtor. She's chatty and she spills the beans about Hal having a twin brother. And Petey understandably feels betrayed because why would you lie about that?
Mm-hmm.
Barbara also explains that after the estate sale, the town has been plagued by a series of bizarre and outlandish deaths. And sure enough, she's next. A shotgun falls out of the closet and also explodes her in a way that I feel like is probably not true to real life.
Yeah, like comically explosion situation.
Everyone in this movie is very explosive.
I know. I mean, maybe it's just existing in a world where like that's how the human body functions, but I feel like it doesn't do that. I am obsessed with this realtor though, and I truly, yeah, I would watch like a full like prequel trilogy about her her dealings in the town, you know.
I would too. Speaking of line delivery with Tatiana Maslany, this woman has great line delivery as well. And the way that she seems honestly distressed that Hal has lost his childhood toy because he asks about the monkey and she's like, oh, your little furry friend. I don't know what it was about the line delivery, but it was so cute.
It's so cute. She's incredible. Yes. And I'm sad we didn't get more of her.
Barbara's such a great name for a realtor too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like perfect. Her outfit is very Barbara, yes. You know, we love Barbara. Yeah.
While they're at Aunt Ida's house, Bill calls Hal again, and Hal suspects through this phone call that Bill is actually close by in town. He then looks into the yellow pages and he finds a Mrs. Monkey listed. He calls the number and reaches an answering machine. On the answering machine's message is Bill's voice, and he says that he is no longer taking calls about his ad because he has found the toy monkey he was looking for. The penny drops for Hal. He puts the pieces together, and he decides that Bill has caused this series of unusual deaths throughout town with the monkey. This is also a little muddy to me. I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure why Bill is even reaching out to his brother.
This is definitely where I feel like I lost the plot. Like I was like,
Yes.
why is there a Mrs. Why is it in there as Mrs. Monkey? Why? Just I have a lot of whys about this whole
Yeah,
thing, especially like I also just don't understand why Hal would even listen to what Bill's saying anyway. Like they're
right.
estranged.
They're
It's his,
completely estranged. They don't talk to each other. He
right.
doesn't even know where he's living, obviously, because he, I guess, assumed that Bill was living somewhere else. And then seemed surprised to
Yeah.
learn that Bill was there in their hometown. Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't. And there are, I feel, more efficient and logical ways to accomplish what Bill is trying to accomplish without the use of the monkey. But of course, if you take the
That's
monkey out
true.
of the equation,
He
then
could just kill his brother.
yeah, or like, something. I mean, I just, instead of just like the random twisting of the key over and over and
Yes.
over again, it's probably, I don't know. I'm like, Bill, what are you doing, babe? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And also the introduction of Ricky. Ricky is just a middleman. It's like Bill had put out feelers to the ad to be like, hey, if you find this toy monkey, let me know. But we do see Bill going to Aunt Ida's house at some point to like in search of the monkey. So maybe the monkey was just hiding from him. But then if it was hiding from him, why would it? Anyway, yeah, it gets a little convoluted.
Yeah, I get again, like I guess it doesn't need to make sense because it's a fucking haunted cursed monkey
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yes.
but like it does like raise questions around like why now, like if the monkey can just move itself and like
Hmm.
hide around, like why does it wait sometimes and why does it not wait other times? Like I don't know. I just am like
Yeah.
if he can just travel himself, what's he doing in the well for so long? And
Yeah.
yeah, anyway.
Yes, we then cut to a flashback, this time from Bill's point of view, with a voiceover from Bill. When he was a kid, he figured out that Hal had turned the key and killed their mom. But by the time Bill went back to the well to retrieve the monkey and exact his revenge, the monkey was gone and only its key was left behind, which Bill took as a sign that the monkey would return someday. So he eagerly waited for decades, seeing signs of the monkey everywhere he looked, in a fortune cookie, at a Chinese restaurant, on a stripper. This was a strange image.
Yeah.
Finally, the long-haired teenager Ricky found the monkey at Aunt Ida's estate sale and sold it to Bill. Bill reunited the monkey with the key that he had kept all those years and turned it over and over and over again, hoping to kill Hal, but not succeeding. So this is why this series of strange deaths has been happening in town, because as they explained earlier, you can't control the monkey. It's kind of Russian roulette. When you turn the key, you don't know who the monkey is going to target. So now in the present, Ricky returns to Bill wanting to buy back the monkey, but Bill refuses to give it to him. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Theo James as Bill.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
The weird haircut, like we said, to differentiate. At very, very first glance, I was like, Jermaine Clement? I don't know. There's just something about the way they made him look. It's the lips, maybe.
Oh my God, it was giving Jermaine Clement. Wow.
I do think that Theo James does a good job of playing these dual roles. I think it would have been more difficult if Bill weren't so cartoonish. Like so much in this movie, he is very cartoonish. He is over the top. He talks in this weird, affected way. He has the weird haircut. He seems very, I don't know if ditzy is the right word, kind of.
Himbo.
Yeah. So if it weren't for the fact that Bill were so over the top, then maybe it would have been less convincing, Theo James' performance as these two different characters. But that being said, what we do have and what we're presented with, I think that Theo James did a good job differentiating these characters.
I agree. I mean, Bill definitely has just like a different aura
Yes.
than Hal, and and some of that is in what you're saying, like the affectations and stuff like that. But Yeah, I think it is enhanced by the fact that like he's literally like in like an evil lair and just
Yes.
like explaining his plan like verbatim or whatever. So, yeah, I feel like at this point in the movie I'm like completely like over the bridge of like I just can't take anything in this movie
Yes.
seriously, right?
It is very, layer is a good word. It's very superhero villain. It's very like villainous fortress of solitude or something, surrounded by his weird knickknacks in his little lair.
Even like there's like a lot of weird like neon colors and lights
Yes.
and like it's just like very interesting looking in a way that feels completely like not like it doesn't exist in our universe or something. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, kind of like dreamlike almost in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back at the motel, Hal calls Bill and orders him to stop turning the key, to stop killing so many innocent people.
I love this. You knock it off. You know?
Stop with the evil monkey shenanigans.
Yes.
How dare you? But Bill not only refuses to stop, he has a proposal for Hal. He says he wants Petey to turn the key. He's convinced that whoever turns the key is safe from death, and he knows Hal wants to keep Petey safe. So either Petey can come to him and turn the key, or Bill vows to keep turning the key forever. This is
Hmm.
another part where I'm like, what?
I know. And I feel
Uh,
like too, like when I just get the sense that like this bit about Petey being immune when he turns the key, like I feel like I can sense Osgood Perkins being like, yes, I cracked something so interesting from this script, but it just really did feel like I don't know. At that point, I was like, okay, all right, just let's get it. Let's just get it going. Just turn that thing so I can go home, you know?
Yes, I do feel like even in a horror film, there has to be this internal logical consistency, even if it is like bizarre, weird horror movie logic, and we already have some rules, quote unquote, for how the monkey works and doesn't work. And this idea that like whoever turns the key is immune, I'm just like, well, where is this coming from? Because I guess this is just Bill's assumption since he has turned the key so many times. And as far as he knows, no one who has turned the key has died. But to me, this felt like an odd leap of logic, even for a deeply illogical film.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, just even more straightforwardly, why does Bill know anything about Petey, much less Hal's
Right.
relationship with Petey? Like he appeals to Hal's desire to protect Petey, and I'm just like, why does he even
How does he know
know
that?
this? Like
Yeah.
they're estranged, like they haven't spoken to each other in decades.
Right. That is weird.
And again, why would Hal even listen to a single thing his brother
Right.
said?
I mean, I feel like a lot of the logic rules that they're like deriving just through like trial and error feel like, as a researcher myself, I just have to say like dubious methodology happening in these little experiments. And I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable drawing that conclusion myself, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
uh, Hal is rattled by this phone call, and he talks to Petey, who did not overhear the phone call at all. And he tells Petey he'll be better off adopted. Phrasing not good. Petey obviously does not take this well, and they argue. Hal almost levels with him about the whole evil cursed monkey thing, but it's at that moment that they are interrupted by Ricky, who barges in dressed in his father's old police officer uniform, posing as a police officer. He brandishes a pistol at them and kidnaps them. Again, Ricky, why?
No, I know, Ricky. What are you doing, babe? Also, this isn't a Chekhov's gun, but I just like at this point I was like, okay, it's interesting that there's like this stuff about a uniformed dad, a uniformed missing dad of like
Mm-hmm.
the pilot from Adam Scott and now this like cop uniform. So there
Oh,
was like
yeah.
a spidey sense that was tingling in me, but I was like, this isn't a Chekhov's whatever, but it is another just weird thing that's in this movie where it feels like a callback, but it doesn't like lead anywhere really. Like,
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, I also thought it would be more relevant somehow that the dad was a cop.
Yeah, same.
There's got to be a reason why he's a cop and not just another estranged father, but no, I guess
Yeah.
not. I guess it was just an excuse to have Ricky get a gun. Yeah, so I clocked it, but I'm not really sure the purpose.
A lot going on with Ricky and his family, right? Just that we
Hmm.
can sort of gather through some visual storytelling, but I am still just so baffled as to like what the purpose of Ricky is, and yeah.
Yeah, part of me is like, is this Ricky character here just to up the kill count? But it seems like an awfully convoluted way just to have another death when there has not been any restraint shown so far in the movie
Yeah.
as far as the death count goes.
I mean, because like the swimmer at the motel, I mean, there are like
Hmm.
people that are just like random, collateral damage. And it's obviously just like a vehicle for Oz Perkins to like blow things up or
Yes.
whatever. But like Ricky is like part of it, like he really is like part of like
Yeah.
advancing the plot in some ways, but he just also feels so ancillary to anything going on. It was very, very bizarre.
He's named, he's a character, he has a backstory, but yeah, doesn't amount to much. Ricky makes Hal drive them to the abandoned hotel where Bill lives. He then orders Petey at gunpoint to go inside and get the monkey for him. As Petey leaves, Hal warns him not to turn the key on the monkey. Inside the hotel, Bill has Kevin McAllister the shit out of the place. It's absolutely lousy with deadly booby traps. Oh, and meanwhile, Hal clocks a large beehive hanging ominously over the parked car.
And if we can't get any more like, yeah, Final Destination, as soon as you see that
Seriously.
beehive, it's like, okay.
So this is a moment where I'm like, Meg, what were you thinking? Because I did officially write down as guesses Chekhov's booby traps and Chekhov's beehive. But almost immediately as I wrote them down, I was like, these don't count.
Yeah.
For all the reasons we've said before, it's too obvious. It's not subtextual. We're already in the third act. This is way too late to be introducing a genuine Chekhov's gun by definition. So I'm not really sure why I wrote these down, but I did. So I have to try to be true. I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to be like, yes, I wrote down these two bad guesses,
Oh, I appreciate your honesty.
but
Honestly, I feel like at this point in the movie too, like I almost would have, well, who knows in execution, but like in theory, I feel like I almost would have respected it more if he just started showing us a bunch of random stuff that didn't turn out to be methods of death, right?
oh my gosh, that would be great. I actually love that idea because then it would subvert your expectations in
Exactly.
a fun and funny way. Yes,
Yeah.
I like that.
But I feel
Hmm.
like you'd have to do it like a lot, right? Like you couldn't just show like the bee's nest or whatever, but like how
Yes.
funny would it be to just see this like wasp nest and then like nothing materializes from
Yes,
it?
exactly. Petey finally comes face to face with his Uncle Bill, who within moments of meeting him does something that Hal never did. He opens up about their family. Bill tells Petey that he's named after his grandfather, who was a pilot, and the monkey once belonged to him. Turning its key is like a Shelbourne family tradition, if you will. So I guess desperate to feel any semblance of a familial connection, Petey ignores his father's warning and, without hesitation, turns the key at Bill's behest. And I'm just like, come on, dude.
Why? Yeah, like just
I get that
why?
you're a rebellious teenager and all that, but yeah.
Uh,
This time, though, Ricky is the monkey's target. After he accidentally shoots the pistol through the car's windshield and into the beehive, a veritable fire hose stream of bees flies down Ricky's throat. And my expectations were subverted here because I expected him to explode spectacularly. And
oh,
he did
okay.
not.
Yeah, that's very unusual for this film. Yeah.
I thought the bees would explode out of his body, but
Very subdued death scene in
it's
comparison to the
true.
rest of them. Yeah.
It's true. Bill at this point is absolutely enraged that Hal has escaped the monkey yet again. He commands the monkey to kill Hal and tries to force it to bring the drumstick down. The monkey resists, but then it does beat upon the drum of its own accord, repeatedly and furiously shaking the entire abandoned motel. And Bill hears screams from outside. Looking out the window, it's complete chaos. There are explosions, fires, a plane plummeting from the sky, and then a skydiving bride and groom fall through the ceiling.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. Love
Dead and
it.
disemboweled. Yes, they did have a bit of a payoff there.
A nighttime dive,
Oh,
nonetheless.
that seems ill-advised.
Yeah, I've never heard of that, but leave it to the monkey that like it doesn't matter, right? Like we're killing the skydivers.
Skydivers have to die at some point,
Yeah.
yes.
I feel like at this point too, like I kind of looped back around. Like there was a real lull in the middle where I'm like, okay, like come on. Now that the monkey is just like fully unleashed and there's skydivers falling through the ceiling and like all this other stuff, I looped around to like, this is incredible and I love this.
You came back
I
around
did, yeah.
completely,
Just
yes.
for a little bit because I ended on a low note, but yeah.
Yeah, there were definitely brief moments where that glimmer came back where I was like, oh, I enjoy this. And then
Yeah.
in the next scene, I'd be like, I don't enjoy this.
Yeah. The skydiver death, like that felt fun. I was like, this is fun and funny. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that. Hal confronts Bill, and Bill confesses that yes, he has indeed been trying to kill Hal these past few days because Hal killed their mom and because Hal had wanted Bill dead once too. They realize that they've both been in pain, alone all these years, and swear to be brothers once again. But their reconciliation is very short-lived. The monkey's drumstick comes down once more, triggering a booby-trapped cannon that blows Bill's head off with Lois's bowling ball.
Obsessed.
R.I.P. Bill.
R.I.P. Bill, like big time too. It was like, I think you see like some eyes like sliding down the wall.
You do. You see his ear on like one side of the bowling ball and like a little eye on the other. Yes, it's smashed into the wall. Mm-hmm.
Oz. That's a lot, Oz. Come on, man.
In our final scene, Hal and Petey are forlornly driving away with the monkey in the back seat. It's a complete dystopia outside. There's smoke choking the skies, fires, bodies everywhere, end of days shit. Hal stops at a deserted traffic light as a pale man on a pale horse rides by. A bit on the nose.
Meg, what was this? Like, I mean, I'm familiar with like the Pale Rider,
Yes.
but it just felt I was like, what are you doing here?
I think we are meant to literally believe that Hal has actually seen the embodiment of death ride by because Petey clocks it as well. They're both looking at this rider on the pale horse. So is the monkey death? I don't know. That's the thing. It's like if we want to embody death, then surely the monkey is death, right?
Right.
Like why do we have two avatars of death in this evil monkey movie?
Right. Yeah. So like part of me was like, okay, was the spirit of death, it's now like released out of the monkey is one interpretation.
Oh, maybe.
Another interpretation is that like the monkey just brought about an apocalypse. But I don't know. I feel like we're giving Oz Perkins like more I don't think he really thought about it. I just think he thought this would make for a very cool visual and it's like a movie about death, so like let's just have death like ride by on a horse, I guess. Question mark.
I think that interpretation probably is the right interpretation. I do feel like the number of deaths are maybe disproportionate to the number of times the key was turned. Mm-hmm. So I think we are meant to believe that some sort of threshold has been passed and just mass death has been unleashed. And maybe, in fact, no matter what Hal may do or what the monkey may or may not do, that genie can't be put back into the bottle. Death is just loose upon the world. I guess that's what we're meant to take from it.
Yeah. Because also I was like, well, I was kind of interested to like have the zoom out, like is this happening elsewhere? Because there's obviously like a spatial proximity element to who the monkey chooses, which is why we don't get to see Elijah Wood die on a goddamn jet ski, which I was waiting for like the whole movie. But it just feels like every time you maybe get a hang of the logic of the monkey, it just slips through your fingers yet again because of some cool imagery or some cool like quote unquote callback that they wanted to put in there. So that was annoying.
Absolutely. Hal shares a knowing nod with Death and then smiles bitterly at Petey and suggests that maybe they should go dancing because that's what Petey's grandmother Lois would do. So at last, Hal is opening up to his son. better late than never, question mark, at the literal end of the world.
He's healed.
Yeah. Hal and Petey drive off into the distance. A school bus full of cheerleaders hanging out the bus windows drives by, and then they're all decapitated by a passing semi. The end.
The end.
Because we just needed one last mass death to exit out of the movie.
Yes. Yeah, I know. The feeling that I was left with at the end was I was just sort of like, huh, okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
guess
like,
there it was.
So maybe it's just because they were both adaptations of Stephen King's work, but the end of this movie left me with very strong The Mist vibes.
Oh.
Let's just end on a real downer.
Mhm.
We're going to have a real nihilistic, misanthropic movie, and that's how it's going to end, too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
But yeah, so that was The Monkey.
That was the monkey.
Yeah, that was The Monkey. Oh boy. I think that the listeners by now have already sort of gathered what we thought about this. But yeah, Bridget, what did you think overall about this movie?
I mean, I'll say that like if it had been sort of like an entry into like an anthology, like a short film, like anthology or something like that, it might have worked a little bit better. This movie took me on a journey. There were times where I really liked what it was doing and where it was going. And then there were times where I was in a real valley, and I went through a couple cycles of that. I think, as I said earlier, I wouldn't go so far to be like, this is so bad. It's like unwatchable. Like,
Right.
I think that there are like enjoyable elements, and you'll be fine to watch it once, but I don't know that I'll ever pick it up again.
I think that's a pretty fair encapsulation of how I felt too. It started off on such a high for me.
Yeah.
In the first 5 minutes, I was so excited. I was like, oh boy, I can't wait to watch the rest of this movie. I had pretty high expectations just because, like I said, I was all on board for a goofy ass horror movie. So I did become maybe more disappointed than the average viewer when it did have those dips and troughs where it really lost me. I do think that the gore was not employed the best way it could have been. A little too over the top, a little too gratuitous.
Mhm.
And even if we had kept like the same volume of grisly deaths, my reaction to it would have been different if the entire tone of the movie had been different. And by that, I mean, it's quite a mean-spirited film.
It is so dark.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, it's obviously delighting in killing people, which, I'm not trying to like wag my finger or whatever and be like, how dare you, Oz Perkins, kill people in a horror movie. But, but I think there is a fine line between like just really torturing every single character you find on screen and also making almost every character so deeply unlikable, with maybe the only exceptions being Lois and Barbara the realtor. It gives me the impression that the makers of the movies don't particularly like people.
They don't like
which
people.
which is maybe not the feeling I want to come away with in a movie, because deaths are more impactful when you don't want them to happen.
Right. Otherwise, there's just like no stakes at all. And it's just like, I'm watching somebody explode in a pool, and like, what else am I doing with my day? Right.
Yes. Yeah. And, one of the great draws of good horror movies is that you don't want bad things to befall the characters. And that's the central tension of the movie, is that you're rooting for the characters to escape evil, where in this movie it was just kind of like, shrug, I honestly don't care if they die or not.
Yeah. And I think like one thing that I did like about the movie, but it like wasn't done very well, I think like that central theme of like the idea that everybody dies.
Yes.
And like, we don't know when, and it's, you can't pin it down. It's hard to predict or whatever. It's a very interesting premise to like explore, right? And I don't know that there was like much else said about that idea in this movie.
Yes.
And not every horror movie needs to be like some big think piece. Like sometimes it's a popcorn movie and whatever.
Sure.
But I did read this interview with Oz Perkins about his like fascination with that idea. And Do you know how his parents died?
I do, sadly. Yeah, it's very tragic. Why don't you tell the listener?
Well, his dad, who I maybe would get some details wrong, so listeners, like, just go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole yourselves. But, his dad was a gay man who kind of was forced into conversion therapy and like just had this really tragic life in
Hmm.
regards to his sexuality. Ended up dying of AIDS. His
Hmm.
mom died in fucking 9/11.
Yeah.
And I read this interview where he was talking about his experience of having to contend with both of his parents dying in these
Yes.
big, like, tabloid, like, very
Hmm.
public kind of ways and very unpredictable kind of ways, and just really, like, shocking, salacious deaths, like both of his
Yes.
parents. And not that I think everybody needs to like lay all of their traumas like on screen if you're like a filmmaker or some other artist, but I thought reading this interview of him talking about that was more interesting than the movie itself, in which he said he was sort of like exploring that. And I don't know that that like translated for me in the movie, but I was like, wow, that sounds like a very interesting movie that I did not just see.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, I read about his parents' deaths after watching the movie. And similar to you, I read that and I was like, well, where is this explored in the movie? Because you would expect someone with such a tragic and unusual relationship with death. Because I mean, obviously, as the movie says, everyone dies, everyone has experienced death. But to have both of your parents die in very unusual
Yeah.
circumstances that were also national conversations,
Yeah.
that's a unique perspective in which to talk about death. And I do think that the movie, it does introduce interesting themes, but like you said, they're introduced and then they're just kind of not meaningfully explored, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think, personally, because
Mm-hmm.
we do have the monologue from Lois about how everyone dies, and there's something interesting there about how there is no justice or fairness in death, only certainty. And yes, all the deaths or most of the deaths depicted in this movie aren't fair or just or deserved. And I think there is a bit of a message there that you can make yourself a bit crazy trying to make sense of death when it is so unpredictable and also so unavoidable. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it also could have talked in a more interesting way about how you shouldn't waste your whole life trying to outrun death in the way that Hal did. Like, he never really lived his life because of this encompassing fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
That's reading maybe more into the movie than what the movie actually gives us.
Well, I think like well said, and to that point, sometimes I feel like there are filmmakers, particularly in the horror genre, who misconstrue being subversive with being mean-spirited, right? Like there's
Yes.
people who are like, I'm just gonna make the darkest shit of all time for
Right.
no rhyme or reason, and like give me my flowers, isn't that interesting and cool? And like it's not interesting and cool because you're not
Right.
actually being subversive by just making a movie where like people do bad things, they're horrible people, they hate each other, they die, and then like the movie's over. I
Right.
I don't find that compelling or interesting at all.
Me either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And gosh, another theme that I feel like the bones are there, but they weren't fleshed out is just the whole idea of the father-son relationship.
Yes.
Yes, like obviously that's meant to be a central theme of the story, and like parental abandonment and this fear of being a father, of being a parent, this guilt of abandoning your child even if you think you're doing it for the right reasons, quote unquote. But even that, at the end of this movie, I did not feel like the father son relationship was repaired. I think we were meant to believe that. Like, oh, look, he's opening up. They're going dancing. He's sharing stories about his mother. But I did not at all buy it that this father and son in particular had crossed that bridge.
Yeah. And I think there's no way that Elijah Wood is going to let this shit go. Like he's still going to go forward with the adoption or whatever,
He's
but
going to take Petey out on that jet ski.
yes. Now, remind me, because this is like something that's really irking me.
Hmm.
Do Hal and Bill ever like speculate or entertain a conversation about what happened to their dad?
I don't think they do.
Because
No.
clearly, like, they have learned that their dad owned this cursed object.
Right.
In their mind, they're told the dad just stepped out and like never returned. And I was just
Hmm.
waiting for them to be like, "Oh, dad didn't abandon us. He probably was killed by this monkey." And that never happened. And that felt like a weird like gap in the script as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it could have been an opportunity for Hal upon reflecting with on his own relationship with his son and seeing that he is in fact doing exactly what his own father did. But no,
Yeah.
he never seems to come to terms with that or acknowledge it in any way or view his father in a different light at all. Another dropped thread in this movie, I would
Yeah.
say.
Or I guess maybe Adam Scott did abandon them. I guess the same way that Hal like is abandoning Petey, and he didn't actually die at the hands of the
Also
monkey.
possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess in my mind I was just like assuming he was killed by the monkey at some point, and that's why he never came back. But I guess we don't know.
Yes, I did want to briefly compare this to the short story. So I
Yeah.
read the short story after watching the movie. It's very short, it's about 30 pages. And, you know, I think it was a pretty good example of a Stephen King story. It was short and to the point, had great descriptors. I really liked how the monkey was portrayed because it sort of has dialogue with Hal. It talks to Hal in a
Oh,
way. I think it's not meant to be taken literally, but
right.
you see dialogue from the monkey that's like, who's next, Hal? Is it you? Is it your brother? Is it your mom? And it's just sort of like taunting him. And in the short story, it does have sparser world building, so there aren't these rules around it. At no point in the short story does it say the person who turns the key doesn't die. You know, it's a little bit more vague. And actually it was quite interesting because at first in the book I was like, these deaths are unexpected, but they're all also natural and believable deaths. So at first in the short story, I'm like, well, maybe it's not an evil monkey at all. Maybe it's just this child trying to find some meaning to these inexplicable deaths in his life and assigning it to this weird monkey toy he found.
Yeah.
But it is a Stephen King novel, so it you know it is an evil monkey.
It is an evil
it's not
monkey. Okay.
it's not just a metaphor. But no, I quite liked it. So you know if you have an hour or two that you want to read a short story, I would recommend it. I liked. All said and done, I liked this short story much better than the movie.
Ah,
And even like the Aunt Ida character, she barely shows up in the book, but there's a lot of love between her and Hal. Like he even talks about how instantly Aunt Ida stepped into his life when his mom died. And you just get this little vignette of like what seemed to be like a quite nice relationship. So I feel like that was what was most missing in the movie for me.
yeah, just some glimmer of like a reason to like these people.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
I will say
interesting.
though, I don't want to shit on the movie completely. So like the design of the monkey itself I really liked.
Yeah, me too.
Like very creepy looking. It has this kind of eerie light behind its eyes that gives us this unnatural life to it. I found it a very good design for a horror movie villain.
I was reading too that the monkey in the book, it's cymbals and not a drum.
That's right. Yes.
And I think it's interesting that they made that change. The drum is really effective.
The reason that I read this change was made, and please take this with a grain of salt because I don't know if this is true or not, but the reason going around is that Disney's gonna Disney. Disney claimed that they have a copyright to this design of Cymbal Monkey as seen in Toy Story
From
3.
Toy Story 3.
Yes. So apparently Osgood Perkins did not want to get sued by Disney. You know, good call. No one wants to get
Yeah.
sued by Disney. So he
Yeah.
decided to make it a drum kit monkey instead. And he said that he quite liked that change because you get this sort of literal drum roll. And I think that that was a good change.
It was really effective. That's interesting
Mhm.
though. Yeah, I wonder how that tension would have changed if it was cymbals instead of the
Yeah.
drum. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Like the design of the monkey was so good. And there
Yeah.
was a lot of just like extreme close-ups, like on just its
Yes.
eyes, and it would just like linger there. Very creepy.
Very unsettling. I liked some of the sound design. Sometimes you would just get this sort of like this quiet whirring of like the inner mechanisms of the monkey, like doing something so that, you know, built up tension. You're like, oh, it's coming to life. And also sometimes you would get the faint organ grinder music. And I like that too, because again, that sort of plays with expectations. You get this friendly childhood toy slash song, but that it induces dread, you know? So I thought that was pretty fun
That
too.
is something that I love about horror movies that are about like evil toys because
Yeah.
it is like that juxtaposition of like nice friendly music or image or something with like debauchery and like murder, you
Right.
know? And there's like no shortage of horror movies about cursed toys. So
That's true. It's a popular trope.
it is. And yeah, in the pantheon of cursed toys, I really like how the monkey looked in this one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line for me is if I want to watch a tongue-in-cheek horror film in which people die in increasingly improbable and convoluted ways, I think I'll just watch Final Destination.
Yeah, I was gonna say, y'all just turn the brain off, and if you're gonna watch The Monkey and just don't think about it too hard. But also,
Yeah,
if you're gonna dedicate time to something like that, there are probably other turn your brain off films that I think were a little bit more successful than this one.
I would agree with that. And maybe instead of The Monkey, watch Longlegs instead. That was a better offering
Yeah.
from Oz
Yes,
Perkins.
I
Yeah.
think so too. Have you seen any of his other movies?
I don't believe so.
I generally like his other stuff, but now that we're kind of talking about the monkey, it is true. Like when I think back through his catalog, they're all very dark.
Oh,
Like
I see.
very, very just like bad things happen, and like that's what you're getting, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Worth checking out, though. He's an interesting filmmaker. And also, despite what I said about The Monkey and not particularly enjoying it, I liked it enough that I do want to see what he comes out with next.
Yeah, I think that there's like he has an interesting vision, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, I'll keep rocking with him, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for The Monkey. So let's move on to the game. It's time to tally the points and see who won. Okay. So I think maybe we might approach the point tallying a little bit differently than in other episodes, but let me know what you think. So usually we go through one by one and discuss, but I feel like there's this sort of like umbrella similarity
Yeah.
to all of our guesses that I feel like we can almost just like lump this into one discussion if you feel okay
I
with
totally agree. Yeah. I think that the weaponry stuff is like an interesting element.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So just as a refresher for the listener, we had Chekhov's boomerang, Chekhov's bowling ball, Chekhov's missing dad, Chekhov's flamethrower, Chekhov's fish hooks, Chekhov's parenting book, Chekhov's jet ski, Chekhov's skydiving, Chekhov's booby traps, and Chekhov's beehive.
Hmm.
That's a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to come out with my interpretation. Let me know what you think, whether you agree or disagree. Personally, I think the only argument that can be made for Chekhov's gun out of all of these is Chekhov's bowling ball.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Here's why. So, Chekhov's bowling ball, it's introduced in Act 1. We get Hal as a young child fantasizing about crushing Bill's head with Lois's personalized bowling ball, which is at the very least foreshadowing, at the very least.
Hmm.
And I think that what pushes it into Chekhov's gun territory is that it does have the payoff in the end. It is, in fact, what kills Bill,
Hmm.
which is pretty important to the plot. Like, of all these things, this one death does actually have a meaningful effect on the plot.
Hmm.
So that is my argument for why I think Chekhov's bowling ball may be the only one.
I think you've convinced me. I was gonna say that like I'm not sure that there were any in this movie, but I think
I
you're
think that
right.
that's fair too. I think that you could also say the bowling ball was not, but
Well, I think like if you're looking at the we talked about extrapolating it, right? Like Act 1 versus Act 3,
Mhm.
Bill's death is like incredibly important.
Yes.
And it's also interesting. It's almost like a little switchback where like you see the bowling ball, you see a fantasy involving somebody dying with a bowling ball in close proximity to each other.
Yes.
but then it comes back. So it's like
Yes.
there's like a third, reveal about the bowling ball, which does feel Chekhov's gunny to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, do you agree with that? Any other thoughts on any of these other things we flagged?
Totally agree. I'm still pissed that the jet ski didn't come back 'cause
You know how the jet skis release sort of like the stream
the
of water
spray.
behind
Yeah.
them? I mean, blood spray, right? Surely someone could get run over by the jet ski and then it's just shooting blood behind it. I can envision it.
It's prime time for like, Final Destination shit. Actually,
Absolutely.
is there a death involving a jet ski in Final Destination? Because if not, like, let's
There should
make
be.
that happen. There should
Yeah.
be. Yeah. But also, I realize that like Elijah Wood dying on the jet ski wouldn't have been an official Chekhov's gun. It just would have been a funny and
That's
cool thing to happen.
It would have been pretty funny, and I would have loved to see more of Elijah Wood, even if it was his grisly, horrible death.
Yeah, Elijah Wood in and of himself maybe is a Chekhov gun. It's like we want him to be purposeful to this plot. Can we bring him back?
That is a funny way of metagaming Chekhov's gun is when you see an actor who's like way too big of an actor to just be in the movie once, and you're like, well, it's Morgan Freeman. Of course we're going to see him again, something like that.
Can I tell you, and I hope it's okay. I mean, at this point, this movie's like 10 years old or something like that. But so like spoilers for Prisoners coming up. And so if you haven't seen that film, like, fast forward 30 seconds or something. When my husband and I saw Prisoners, like immediately when Melissa Leo came on the screen, my husband was like, that is Oscar winner Melissa Leo. And then she's only in the movie for like a few minutes, like at the beginning. And he was like,
Right.
her ass is coming back at some point, right?
Absolutely.
And then she ended up being like a really important part. So yeah, like that, it does kind of take you out of it a little bit when there's like a really famous person that just like pops in for a second.
It's true. Shout out to Melissa Leo. Also, shout out to Homicide: Life on the Street, one of my favorite shows ever that she's in. So good.
I loved Homicide: Life on the
What?
Street.
Bridget, no one else has
Yes.
even seen this show.
Oh my God, it was like Saturday nights at my divorced dad's apartment. We'd be watching Andre Braugher and Homicide: Life on the Street.
Okay, do you want to do a Homicide and H Lots rewatch podcast with me called Red to Black?
Maybe we should be doing that. Yeah, because I mean, honestly, have not watched those since I was 8 or what, like when they were airing, like in real time.
And they are finally on streaming for the first time ever as of last year, I want to say. So
Stop. Oh my God.
yeah, go watch Homicide: Life on the Street, people. If you liked The Wire, you'll like the OG Wire, which is Homicide.
Yeah.
But I digress. Okay, give me a moment to quickly calculate points or subtract a lot of points, I suppose. Beep, boop, beep. Okay, I've calculated the points, although I feel like some special dispensation needs to be made. Anyway, Bridget, you have -6 points,
Woo!
and I have -4 points, technically
Woo!
making me the winner.
Well
But I
done,
feel
Meg.
like this is a little bit unfair because you were the one who guessed Chekhov's bowling ball, which we agreed was the only actual Chekhov's gun in
Didn't
this
you
whole
also
movie.
guess the bowling ball?
I did not guess the bowling ball, so I don't know. I feel like
Maybe we can agree on like a spiritual tie.
that's yeah. That sounds good to me. Spiritual tie. Amazing. Hello, Meg here from the future to issue a correction. In the excitement of the moment, I miscalculated our points. We both had -4 points. So it was not just a spiritual tie, it was, in fact, a literal tie. And in this case, I will say the win goes to the guest. So congratulations to Bridget. Bridget, it has been so much fun having you on the podcast.
This
I would
was
love to have you
so
back
fun.
sometime.
Oh my God, I would love to come back on, especially, yeah, doing a film that has actual like Chekhov's guns in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Try to find one that has actual Chekhov's guns.
Well, it's hard to predict, right? Like you don't
It
want to
is.
know
You
too
never know.
much. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Well, in the meantime, where can listeners find you, or what would you like to leave the listeners with?
Listeners can find me just in the streets of the Bay Area where where I live, but a couple of things that I would like to plug. First, just the Bridget Jones's franchises. said earlier. I know I'm late to the party, but like those were incredible movies. So like I highly recommend those. But then also, so as I mentioned before, I am a professor of higher education, which is really under attack right now. So if you are invested in maintaining media literacy, as is germane to
Mhm.
this podcast, support higher ed. And in California right now, in particular, our state budget is proposing a lot of cuts to higher education. So if you live in California, I would love it if you would contact your state senator and ask them to reinstate, if not improve, the budgetary allocations to the CSU system, because we all need an education, should be free. I wish it were. It's not, but we're doing what we can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And please look in the show notes for more information about how you can help out with that. And I feel bad following that with a call to action to check me out on Instagram. But please do look at Chekhov's Whatever podcast on Instagram. You can find announcements for upcoming episodes there. Be sure to leave a comment or a like. I always want to hear everyone's input and suggestions. And until next time, thanks again for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Chekhov's Whatever. Go to chekhovswhatever.substack.com to follow along with the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a positive review. You can also find video clips and full audio episodes on YouTube, so be sure to like and subscribe at Chekhov's Whatever. And finally, you can send email to chekhovswhateverpodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's end this show with a bang.